It's a grassroots action. Action on climate change comes from the people and will filter up to the politicians. And these kind of actions are definitely starting to bite.
It used to dominate the landscape, but these days the Australian red cedar is confined to just a few locations. While coal is still our #1 export, red cedar was almost as important in the early years of the region.
Red cedar is our own gold, it's our own tree, and we should be highlighting it, celebrating it and growing it.
Ian McKenzie wants council to incorporate the tree within its urban forest policy to help restore it to its former glory. Just as Grafton celebrates the non-native jacaranda, within a decade Newcastle could have plenty of reasons to honour the red cedar.
And we have the potential for an industry that is a Newcastle-based industry, Red Cedar City, Red Cedar Craft, and we can make money out of it, we can provide jobs for future generations.
Mitchell Hughes, NBN News.
Understandably nervous before the final round, Darren Beck sat 4 strokes ahead of playing partner Jason Norris when they met on the first. In a novel concept, amateurs had the opportunity to tee it up with the professionals over the final rounds, and former tennis star John Newcombe joined the leaders today.
They're really nice guys and, nice and calm out there, and it's fascinating to watch how they get out of tight situations, get up and down out of traps and that.
Unfortunately for Beck, trouble is what he found right from the start. A double bogey had his lead halved after just the first hole. On the second, the margin was back to 1 as he followed up with a bogey, and the tournament suddenly opened to a host of challenges. Norris was keeping his game together as the South Australian now sat in the box seat. But the pressure was coming from everywhere. Local amateur Rudy Bezuidenhout mounted a charge, while Nevin Bassick was another moving the right way. It was US PGA Tour member Jared Lyle who loomed largest on the leaderboard though, moving into a share of second by the 7th. By then, Beck's titles chances really had a case of the wobbles. Norris moved clear of the field by the time they turned at 9. Lyle continued to add all the pressure over the closing holes, but it was Norris who finished a 1-stroke winner.
Touring cancer treatment services at the Calvary Mater Hospital, Shadow Health Minister Nicola Roxon unveiled Labor's Hunter Health Plan. The cornerstone, GP super clinics, which would be built in southern Lake Macquarie and at Port Stephens.
Where we know that there are particularly low numbers of doctors and where we know that this infrastructure investment can help attract new young graduates.
The idea has early support from GPs.
A good opportunity, but it's going to be really important for there to be lots of consultation with GPs and the division.
The Hunter Division has pioneered after-hours GP clinics around the region, and Labor has committed to fund those too.
If Labor is elected, we will ensure that this after-hours service is sustainable and has secure funding for the future.
Also under the Labor Health Plan, Belmont's Medicare office would be reopened.
Over 20,000 signatures have been submitted to the Parliament asking for that Medicare office to be reopened.
The Shadow Minister also reaffirmed a promise for an MRI service in Maitland and funding for the Martyrs PET scanner, a commitment the government has matched.
As businesses in Wallsend CBD recover from the June storm, another more pressing issue is now causing concern. With a police presence long since gone from the suburb and the former station in a state of decay, local MP Sonia Hornery has this afternoon led a community delegation into talks with the Waratah LAC commander.
Well, the community feels like the response times could be improved.
But Wallsend's policing problems may be headed higher, with the Wallsend MP considering an approach to Police Minister David Campbell on what to do with the disused station, with it so far failing to sell as surplus real estate.
I think it's time that we had discussions about the future of that precinct site, for sure, definitely.
Adding to the chorus for a better deal on crime fighting today, the Beresfield Neighbourhood Watch. It has a 1,200 signature petition from the Beresfield-Thornton area demanding Beresfield Police Station return to full operation. Now that's something that won't happen at Mayfield, where, like at Wallsend, the now unmanned station is on the real estate market. The opposition warning that decisions on what will happen with the sale proceeds will be made by Treasurer Michael Costa, not police.
He will allocate that money where he sees it, and I can guarantee Newcastle and Maitland, they're not going to get any of it back.
Gary Blair, NBN News.
Councillor Ian McKenzie is a fan of pedal power, regularly riding from his Mayfield home to council chambers in Newcastle. He believes access throughout the city needs to be improved to encourage people to leave their cars at home in favour of more environmentally friendly modes of transport. That's why he suggested allowing bikes access to the Hunter Street Mall, saying parallel streets aren't appropriate for cycling.
King Street's quite steep and it's not preferable for cycle riding, and Scott Street's really too narrow for cars and bikes to safely share.
The council is calling for feedback on the idea, which already has the support of the Newcastle cycling movement.
Ideally, we'd like to see a segregated pathway for cyclists. I mean, that doesn't restrict pedestrians using the rest of the mall. But if it's a separated cycle path, then there shouldn't be any conflict.
Meanwhile, another civic project is gaining momentum, with Council this week expecting feedback from the Department of Planning on the relocation of the Newcastle Regional Museum.
It's how we're going to use the buildings, any infill buildings and activity around the space. So it's the full gamut. It's a different museum, but it will be an exciting museum.
Jessica Phyllis, NBN News.
From Port Stephens to Gloucester and Foster, many would be familiar with the four-wheel drive and caravan of sitting member Bob Baldwin on the campaign trail. But at the other end of the political spectrum, and for that matter campaign budget, there's his Greens opponent and keen cyclist Judy Donnelly.
And if I make one person stop and think and maybe change their way of life or even change their vote, it's all worthwhile. That's why I do it.
In what could be described as a highly ethical approach, the grandmother from Bungwall, south of Foster, and her partner John are touring the southern half of the Patterson electorate to spread the party's message about clean energy and clean air. Judy now also knows where federal funds could be spent on tourism promotion and infrastructure.
And I must admit, we could do with better cycling facilities generally across Patterson. It's a beautiful electorate to cycle. You know, if we had better facilities, more people would be holidaying and travelling this way.
And don't think a Port Stephens Dungog Maitland ride will exhaust this would-be MP. Judy knows how to stay on song with Greens policies, regardless of the gruelling journey.
There isn't enough federal spending coming down to support the infrastructure that we need so badly. Our failing health system, schools, roads, TAFEs, all need to be addressed.
Gary Blair, NBN News.
In truth, Jason Norris didn't think he was a chance when he began the final day some 4 shots behind leader Darren Beck. But a closing round 69 saw him finish a one-shot winner, his second tournament victory, and only $158 short of winning Australia's secondary golfing tour. As for the event itself, its future looks all but assured at the Vintage in the Hunter Valley for coming years.
We haven't signed off on anything at this point in time, but however, we have an agreement in principle. We'd love to think we've got a 5-year arrangement here, and the Vintage and ourselves are really going to work hard to see that happen.
It's a far cry from 3 months ago when golf officials thought the New South Wales Open had slipped off the calendar for good when previous sponsors pulled out. Saved by the actions of a number of people, including former tennis great John Newcombe, now the Von Nida Tour ending tournament looks safe for some time yet. The beep test has long been regarded as a good measure of fitness. It's also loathed by participants due to its gruelling nature, and Jets players were forced to endure it today. Directed not as a punishment for Friday's poor performance, it was to reinforce one important point.
It's not just going to be good enough to be okay, not for Newcastle Jets.
As the pace increased, marquee signing Mario Jardel, the first to be retired. It took a while, but others began to follow, with local product Joel Woods outlasting the top liners. The majority, though, receiving a pass mark, leaving the coach convinced the form lapse is mental, not physical.
We're not unfit, okay? No dramas as far as that is concerned. So what it is, it's an attitude on the path.
He's called on senior players to lift the team, starting this weekend, and Captain Jade North says he'll overcome a leg infection to make sure he leads by example.
Myself and a few of the older boys, we've got to knuckle down and put like a bit of a plan together to get ourselves right and what we have to do for this weekend.
Van Egmond says they could simply mirror the approach of rivals, the Central Coast.
The bottom line is they seem to want it a little bit more than us, and we've got to get that hunger back.
Now in 4th place on the A-League ladder, Newcastle has the chance to leapfrog Adelaide this weekend when they travel to take on the Reds. Jim Callanan, NBN News. The season-ending Australian Rally Championship round in Victoria didn't start all that well for Michael Guest. On the pace early, 2 separate punctures saw him limp into the service area back in 15th position with a myriad of car trouble. On Sunday, it was a far different story. After his crew did a great job on the car, he was quickly back on the pace, winning 3 of the special stages and making up valuable time on the front runners. The Ford Fiesta finally living up to the hype.
Won the first 2 stages and Simon got a bit back on us in the third one, and both myself, Neil and Spencer have lost a fair bit of time in the dust, up the hill, and the sun's right in your eyes and scary stuff in 5th and 6th gears.
He was actually pushing the champions, Simon and Sue Evans, all the way and only trailed them by 11 seconds on the second day.
Yeah, after all his talk, he's finally backing it up. And it's good to see, Ford really deserves some good results, and it's great to have him pushing me at the moment.
Guest finishing equal 3rd for the rally and 4th in the championship. For up-and-coming driver Brendan Reeves, the off-season will be spent in the repair shed after this. The 7-roll exit, a spectacular way to end 2007.
Yeah, everyone's okay. My ego's a bit sore, but anyway, we're both okay.
It was 7 a.m. and the targets of 4 police raids didn't see this coming. 50 police officers were involved, crushing what's believed to be a major drug supply syndicate, executing 4 search warrants at New Lambton, Cardiff, Macquarie Hills and Warners Bay.
Our investigators at this stage have recovered cash to the amount of $40,000. We're still undergoing searches at this stage, as well as confiscated 2 motor vehicles and some other electrical equipment.
3 men aged 47, 63 and 66, along with a 36-year-old woman, were arrested and charged with a raft of offences, including supplying a commercial quantity of prohibited drug. A 65-year-old Macquarie Hills man was also arrested at Newcastle Airport.
This person's arrest will have a significant impact on some distribution in this area.
Police used strong words to describe the alleged offenders. They're particularly frustrated with the rise of ice or methamphetamine, an addictive illicit drug ruining lives and creating a major drain on police and court resources.
Personally, I see drug distribution as people involved as parasites on the community, and it's significant that these people involved in this network have been distributing ice amphetamine, as well as normal amphetamine, ecstasy and cocaine.
Using sophisticated surveillance techniques, Strike Force Emily detectives had already arrested and charged 13 people with drug offences over the past 18 months, and police believe follow-up charges and arrests will be made. 4 of those arrested today appeared in Newcastle local court. All were refused bail to reappear on February 13. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
The striking workers vented their anger at John Howard's man in the Hunter, protesting outside Paterson MP Bob Baldwin's office, even though he wasn't there. Sandvik workers at Tomago and Hexham recently signed an enterprise agreement, the result of a long industrial campaign. But now they claim that new workers and graduating apprentices are being forced onto AWAs.
The ink's not even dry on the agreement, and we had the company first of all tell 2 apprentices that they must sign the AWA by Friday or they wouldn't be in a job Monday, and to the labour hire workers that if they wanted a permanent job, and this is a permanent job that they've already been promised, that if they wanted that permanent job then they must sign the AWA or there would not be no permanent job at all.
Contractor Neil Spillane says he was recently offered a full-time job with the company.
And I said, I'd like to sign on to the EBA, I don't want to sign an AWA, and they said, sorry, that is all we're offering.
But Bob Baldwin says that's illegal.
Well, nobody can be forced to enter into an AWA.
From all accounts, it seems that Sandvik is very articulate when it comes to offering workers AWAs. But all they would articulate to us today was a big fat no comment. The workers will return tomorrow. Paul Lobb, NBN News.
There is another ramp further down the road which is still backs onto our racecourse. It's covered in mud and silt. We just need them to come down with the excavator and dig that mud and silt out at low tide. Then we'll be able to launch and retrieve the boats.
We've got instruments that can collect samples from the deep ocean at depths of up to 7 kilometres and tell us what the seabed's composed of. And we've got instruments which can sample the fish and the other biology in the ocean.
There's no missing the new building, which makes a mark on the Newcastle East skyline. But residents claim until last week they had no idea the multi-purpose centre was being built.
Nobody knew about it. There was no community consultation on this multi-purpose function centre, which is a major construction.
Maybe stop the building at this stage until they consult with residents and find out what the best alternative may be.
Residents say the building's appearance, proposed use as a licensed premises and operating hours are inappropriate for the area.
The closure time on Friday and Saturday night is midnight, so by the time people leave, they'll be making a noise, they'll be moving to other licensed premises.
They claim Newcastle City Council should have informed them of the federal government's building plans.
The fact is it's Commonwealth land, it's a Commonwealth project, and the Commonwealth are entitled to do what they wish on their land. So until it comes into Council's ownership, we have little or no input into it.
Councillor Aaron Buman is sympathetic to residents' concerns.
Something you'd see at an industrial site at Thornton, not something you'd see on a heritage listed site.
Madeline Bond, NBN News.
The greens are overgrown with weeds, vandals have graffitied the building, and the once popular Waratah Bowling Club is now just a shade of its former self. An emotional Frank Pugh was a member for 29 years.
Very upset. I avoid driving past because of the memories, I guess, and seeing the place in such a state of disrepair.
After a drop in membership, the club was at a point where it was no longer able to pay its bills and closed 4 months ago.
I've lived in Waratah for over 40 years, and it's pretty sad to see that it go into such disrepair and not be a viable part of the bowling fraternity in this area.
The nearby Waratah Rugby Club, which has an adjacent field, wanted to amalgamate with the bowling club, but that proposal was knocked back. According to the Department of Land's expressions of interest for the site closed on November the 2nd. 11 have been received and are currently being evaluated.
We would dearly love to see someone take over the building. Even if the greens are never rejuvenated, at least the building is used.
But the zoning is 6A open space and recreation, creating a stumbling block for some of the commercial proposals. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
Able to speak only limited English body language, said it all at Jets training today. Mario Jardel distancing himself from fellow players after a headline that even he could understand, and one created by an unnamed teammate.
I don't like to see anything like that come out public.
Yeah, it's a little bit disappointing to pick one player out.
Interestingly though, few at the club could defend what's long been the elephant in the room. The indicators in the last few days alone, hard to miss. After playing 55 minutes against Perth at the weekend, the most he's played in a game this season, it was with little impact. And yesterday, Jardel failed a fitness test which many front row forwards in rugby league would comfortably pass.
The marquee player has got to be the pinnacle player in your team, and right at this moment, when it's all said and done, that Mario isn't that player right at this moment.
So the question remains, what will Jets owner Con Constantine do, given he bought the mercurial former European star without consulting the coach?
Hopefully we can get a resolution sooner rather than later, rather than innuendo and disruptions cropping up, which that's the last thing that we need as a team and a football club right at this moment.
Jim Callanan, NBN News.
that's been on the cards for a while now, so this is a bit of preparation for that, a bit of base training, so yeah, that's a big goal.
"67-year-old retired shop owner and father Zivko Skapevsky was arrested at Newcastle Airport, police swooping on him as he arrived on a domestic flight from Melbourne. Today he appeared in court charged with supplying prohibited drugs. In opposing an application for bail, police prosecutor Nicole Hodgett told the court that Skapevsky had allegedly supplied 28 grams or 1 ounce of cocaine to another party. She explained that there was a strong case against him, with telephone intercepts used to support the drug supply charge and his involvement in an organised crime syndicate. $230,000 was seized from his mother's home at Warners Bay, while another $40,000 was discovered at his Macquarie Hills home. Bail was refused and Skapevsky will reappear on December 12. Another alleged member of the drug ring, Brendan Patterson from Waratah, handed himself into police yesterday afternoon. He appeared in Newcastle local court today on drug supply charges, but was given bail. After the Operation Emily raids, Nicholas, Dino and Francesco Martinelli and Belinda McCook were refused bail yesterday to reappear on February 13. They were charged with a range of offences, including supplying a commercial quantity of prohibited drug. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
If nothing else, the Northern Region Commander, Assistant Commissioner Peter Parsons, today admitted the Lower Hunter is understaffed, with 55 of its 259 officers currently off duty.
The unavailability of staff does place an onerous strain on commands, and this one especially because of the size of the command.
Today he met with Police Association officials to try and resolve the staffing shortfall. The meeting was held behind closed doors here at Newcastle Police Station today and didn't finish until late this afternoon, with no firm agreements being reached.
We've all walked out of the meeting today with some clear eyes and hopefully with confidence that we'll come to a conclusion.
Another meeting is scheduled for next week. Madeline Bond, NBN News.
If you ring the RTA hotline from anywhere in the country, this is where the call is answered in Newcastle.
It has all the features of a metropolitan centre with the regional lifestyle. It's very cost competitive, skilled labour force is quite large, and its close proximity to Sydney are all very attractive.
The Commonwealth Bank agrees its call centre's upstairs, while Centrelink, Energy Australia, NIB and the Tax Office also use the city as a customer service hub.
We are an administrative and service sector driven city heart, which is really important.
Another call centre, not unlike this, will be set up in Newcastle by Arvato Services to employ 78 staff in its first 12 months, 200 within 5 years.
Well, they provide services to the financial sector, both in Australia and New Zealand.
It recognises that we are on a level to compete with cities around the world and, of course, capital cities in this country.
The call centre will go into 670 Hunter Street, the same building which houses the new Community Health Centre. Adam McIlrick, NBN News.
"84 years of steelmaking dumped toxic pollutants into the Hunter River. Now, with a third coal loader planned, the steelworks channel will have to be dredged, and fishermen are worried about stirring up the poisonous sludge.
If I could take you down there tomorrow and stir it up and it's just pure oil, it stinks. So, yeah, it's just toxic stuff.
It's like oil. So that could close the whole river once they start, if they're going up right up to Till Street. So I don't know what damage you're going to do.
While Hunter River fishermen like the Hewitts are busy getting their boats ready for the Christmas catch, 2 large dredgers have arrived in the harbour. They've been hired by the Newcastle Coal Infrastructure Group, which claims it won't be stirring up any contaminants.
We're not dredging in the toxic areas. We're dredging in the areas which have been classified as being suitable for dumping at sea and for the fill material that we're after.
But after 40 years on the river, John Hewitt remains worried. Paul Lobb, NBN News.
It really is beginning to look and smell a lot like Christmas, and if we have anything to be thankful for right now, it's stone fruit.
Nice, red, beautiful cherries. That's what Christmas is all about.
Perhaps, but it's also about giving and lots of it, as families start preparing for what is traditionally a tough time of year financially, made worse by the rising cost of housing.
Interest rates are going to hurt people who are already struggling.
In warehouses across the country, volunteers are putting hampers together. Here it's mostly toys being sorted. Mums and dads are looked after too, but there's always room for more.
Perhaps an item of sporting equipment or a cool T-shirt or a up-to-date cap. Something like that would be great for teenage boys especially.
You can donate at the major department stores which launched their respective charity campaigns this week. For Lake Macquarie's Peter Mann, his present will come a month early when the music he composed 2 decades ago forms part of the Sydney Christmas Parade on Sunday week.
It's a great thrill, actually, at my stage of life, to get some recognition, as I said before I died.
Peter, who turned 65 tomorrow, was diagnosed with prostate cancer last year. Part of the proceeds from his album will go to the Prostate Cancer Foundation. Adam McIlrick, NBN News.
Kirk Reynoldson is still seeing red, literally. Suited up in Dragons colours today, he's keen to make use of his NRL life raft.
It's just good to have a home, mate, and have as I said before, a second shot. You know, every boy dreams of playing for NRL, but yeah, another shot at my age is fantastic.
But it's a shot at his former club that remains in his sights, with Reynoldson still disputing his previous contract with Newcastle.
Hopefully we'll come to a resolution by the end of this week, and if we don't, well then I'm prepared just to go to the next step.
That suits Newcastle just fine, with a hearing with the NRL Appeals Committee to reconvene by the end of the week, and the Knights are ready to go.
We've gone ahead, we haven't slowed down in any way, shape or form, and until we get the direction that it's over, we'll continue to do that.
Okay. It's understood Reynoldson is chasing a top-up financial payment from Newcastle, something his former employers will no longer agree to. Jim Callanan, NBN News. Knights players have been back at work for more than a week, but moves to obtain Andrew Johns in a part-time coaching role have deliberately been held back, given his recent distractions. Not anymore.
Well, Andrew's left a message on my phone just half an hour ago, and I haven't had a chance to get to him this morning after training. I'll get to him, but I'm hopeful that that'll be him accepting our invitation.
It'll take a firm contract, though, before any agreement is reached, and those moves are only just taking shape.
Now those sorts of things, his book launch dying down, we think it's probably time that we could start talking some business and see what opportunities there are there that Andrew could work with the club.
Coach of English Super League club Bradford, Steve McNamara, is making the most of his 3-week stay in Australia, starting with a look at the Knights.
I think at any stage of your career, whether you're a young coach, you're a seasoned coach, whatever, you're looking at further ways to enhance yourself and educate yourself, and I'm no different.
He admits looking at players is on the agenda, but not at Newcastle.
Nah, I won't go anywhere near these boys. I think Brian will kill me if I did that. But
Life's a beach, but it wasn't so sunny last week for Mark Bridge. After being tabled a reported $130,000 a year deal to remain in Newcastle, the Jets withdrew after he failed to respond in a required time frame.
It's disappointing just for the fact that I have people coming up to me on the street saying, how can you knock that back and things like that. And I don't want to put up with that sort of stuff. I just want to concentrate on my football.
Something he freely admits has been hard to do of late.
It does play on the back of your mind. I mean, it did last week against Perth with Newcastle coming out during the week about all that stuff. It's a bit annoying.
He can't let it affect him on Saturday night against Iraq in Gosford, a match that will decide the Australians' fate for Beijing.
We don't win, we don't go to the Olympics, simple as that. It's a do-or-die match, and probably my most important game to date.
Bridge and teammate Adam Deputsa remain unavailable for club duty, with the Olyroos' next game only days later in North Korea. After 2 months' rest, Jamie Dwyer is keen to get back in the swing of things with the national team.
A lot of guys won't be just playing against New Zealand, they'll also be trying to impress the coach and selectors for next year as well.
If you hadn't heard, 2008 is an Olympic year, and preparations for Beijing will literally begin with next week's first test.
And we like to come to country towns as the Kookaburras because 90% of us are from the country, so we like to come here, get a good vocal crowd, and hopefully they all wear their green and gold and really get behind us.
One local they won't get on side is Stuart Deering. He'll be the man in the middle, officiating in possibly his last international match.
Hopefully people won't know I'm there because everyone's come here to watch the two teams. If I can just step in when I have to, let them play, let it flow, I'll be more than happy.
It'll be a far cry from 17 years ago when Deering played for the Kookaburras in what doubled as the opening of the International Hockey Centre.
Love him or loathe him, Willie Mason has attracted plenty of attention over the last couple of months. Today, he finally put the speculation on his playing future to bed, deciding on the Roosters deal over Cronulla and appearing in the tricolours with new teammates and coach by his side.
I didn't make my decision till probably this morning. Me and Keno were up, all night talking with Ricky, weighing up the options, with both offers, and it's a pretty stressful time, but I'm glad that, I think I've made the right decision.
Mason has been released from the remaining 2 years of his $800,000 contract with the Bulldogs. His ongoing feud with the club management and Chief Executive Malcolm Node, the catalyst.
It's obviously turned out like this, and not in the best circumstances, but we all move on, and that's what happens in life. It's a business now, and things happen.
And he had only a slight hesitation in signing the release papers.
It was a little bit weird, I've never been in that position before, and I have to say I didn't really feel that comfortable. It rattled me a little bit for about 5 seconds, and I was over it.
Mason wanted time off for a professional fight, but the Bulldogs were not prepared to risk their star forward. Brad Fittler, his new coach, has no qualms.
When you consider boxing's a sport where you've got to be ultra fit anyway, so if anything is going to make the bloke fit, he obviously knows a lot of skills about the game, so I know he won't miss out on any sessions, so he's not going to miss out on, understanding our game and our calls and all that sort of stuff.
I've been pretty excited to see him at the club, so all the boys have been talking about it, and he adds a lot.
The protesters broke into the Munmora power station at dawn before climbing to the roof armed with enough black paint to spell out their message. Others managed to stop a coal conveyor belt for several hours.
A number of those people have fastened themselves to various structures within the power station and are presently being removed from those structures by police rescue.
While the action failed to halt electricity production, Greenpeace says it still highlighted an important issue.
We need to start shutting down old, dirty coal-fired power stations and start replacing them with clean, green, renewable energy.
Meantime, a report by the Centre for Global Development in Washington has found that Australia pumps out more CO2 per person than any other country on the planet. According to the report, the biggest emitters are the Bayswater Power Station in the Hunter Valley and the Eraring Station near Lake Macquarie, each belching more than 20 million tonnes of CO2 a year. The survey says Australia's emission of 10 tonnes of carbon dioxide per person through energy use compares to America's 9 tonnes and 2 tonnes for China. State Energy Minister Ian MacDonald says the report is flawed and that the state government has spent $22 million trying to clean up the power industry. Paul Lobb, NBN News.
On these rolling hills near Muswellbrook, Coal and Allied and Forest New South Wales have begun planting 80,000 spotted gum seedlings. It's the latest addition to a project that is probably the coal industry and forests' best-kept environmental improvement secret.
It is exciting. It's good to see such a large-scale planting as this for us. We have been in the past involved in plantings of smaller scale, which have been relatively successful.
For around 20 years, Forest New South Wales has been undertaking trials and research on the potential for commercial plantation forest using 30,000 hectares of buffer land and rehabilitated open-cut mine sites. With demand for ways to naturally tackle greenhouse gas emissions and government plans for carbon trading by industry, the time is almost right for this project to achieve its ultimate environmental goals.
We're only 3 or 4 years away from an emissions trading scheme nationally, and these forests here are consistent with the federal government's proposal to give recognition for early abatement.
For Muswellbrook's mayor, it's a long-held dream becoming reality.
It's a dream associated with post-mining, a viable commercial timber industry in the Upper Hunter, which is a win-win for everybody.
When disaster struck on the June long weekend, the Hunters' private and public health professionals were ready.
Our surge capacity plan was activated and implemented in a very effective way, so we were able to deal with what was happening plus continue core services.
Hunter New England Health Services' handling of the devastating storms and influx of patients was apparently so impressive it won them the right to host Australia's first Health Emergency Coordinators Conference.
It seemed to me quite appropriate that we actually recognise that contribution.
Today, staff spoke about their more outstanding responses during the emergency.
In Singleton, we had a Mercy nursing home evacuated on the Saturday night. We also did some internal evacuations within our healthcare facilities, and we also sent a medical team out to Merewether RSL Club on the Friday night to assist in the evacuation centre there.
Medical professionals were also briefed about what stumbling blocks they could expect to encounter during disasters.
Communications always is an issue in emergencies. We had not as much problem this time with communications, but the infrastructure often comes to pieces in emergencies.
They may have set up home in Burdekin Park, but if Singleton Council has its way, the Flying Foxes' years of residence may soon come to an end. As far as council is concerned, it's time for the bats to go and the gloves are off.
Council's resolved now to write to the Department of Environment and Climate Change and seek approval to carry out culling of the bats.
Hundreds in the community also want the bats gone and believe spraying a repellent on the trees may allow the public to reclaim the park.
We're trying to do it in a civilised way using a product called Deter that you spray on the trees.
But mention of Singleton's flying fox problem in State Parliament this week by Upper Hunter MP George Souris has got Environment Minister Phil Koperberg involved, raising hope that a solution to the bats' overstay may soon be found. Gary Blair, NBN News.
It's been a community dream for 14 years. Finally, here's what the KidSafe Centre will look like. To be built on the John Hunter Hospital grounds, the centre will transform a bushland parcel and part of a playground into a frontline safety service for kids.
So many children are injured and a lot of them die from their injuries, and we know that we can prevent it.
The centre will offer child restraint fitting, antenatal courses, fire awareness drills for kids and, importantly, information on keeping a child-friendly home.
You'll be able to walk around and visit the inside of a home that's all set up for the under fives to help keep them safe.
A development application is now with Newcastle Council and Leonie Forsyth hopes building will start next year. But KidSafe still needs community financial support to get started, around $500,000. The federal government to foot the rest of the $1 million bill.
If we can get people to really focus on giving KidSafe a hand, let's have this centre for the community, for our kids.
Ron Anderson disappeared from Shoal Bay after sailing up the coast from Pittwater with another man in July. Police have cleared the crewman of any involvement in the disappearance and say it's likely Mr Anderson fell out of his dinghy while trying to row from the shore to his moored boat after having dinner at the Shoal Bay Game Fish Club. The dinghy was never found. After the story aired on NBN's Missing Persons Unit program, police received a number of calls placing Mr Anderson in a range of locations from Lake Macquarie to Melbourne, but none of the leads checked out. A brief has now been prepared for the coroner, and Mr Anderson's family will take the 35-foot yacht back to Melbourne. Meantime, police have made public the name of a man who died when a wave flipped the boat he was on near Broughton Island last weekend. He was 41-year-old Boyd Hart from Oakville on the Hawkesbury. Paul Lobb, NBN News.
He can walk, talk, and even dance. But more importantly, this robot called Asimo can be programmed to assist the elderly or people in wheelchairs with everyday tasks. And that's not all.
Someday he can help people in household, and he can do like a dangerous job like traffic control, police traffic control, like cleaning toxic spills.
Today, the robot was showing off his personality and prowess in Newcastle during his Alive and Unplugged tour.
Oh, it was pretty cool. Asimo could do more than I could think.
And he can do more than just follow orders, thanks to artificial intelligence. Asimo is described as the world's most advanced robot, and while he's taken 21 years to create, Honda hopes that within the next decade we'll be able to see these sorts of humanoid robots helping out in our homes. But just how much we can expect to pay for him remains a mystery. Madeline Bond, NBN News.
I kind of believe myself. I was there through the junior, through 17s and things like that, and kind of always thought if I got back playing and I'd give myself a good chance. But yeah, it's definitely all come very quickly.
On Monday, he failed a fitness test. The following day, he was labelled a liability by an unnamed teammate. And now Mario Jardel is at growing odds to even join the playing squad in Adelaide this weekend.
It's forecast 35, 36 degrees for Saturday, Sunday and Monday. So we have to make sure that people who are going to be involved in the game are physically very fit.
Pressed further if Jardel was in that category.
On face value, you'd say no.
Despite another dubious sign of the marquee man's worth, he remains backed by club management.
Mario's future is not in question.
Their handling of failed contract negotiations with Mark Bridge and Stu Michalek, though, is, namely, by Bridge.
I'm very confident in the way that the club's made every effort to keep the boys here.
Bridge, however, is already looking around, and the Central Coast is known to be a favourite given his friendship with goalkeeper Danny Vukovic.
Danny's there, which make it even easier for me for the transition, but I haven't made any decisions yet, haven't spoke to anyone.
Recently dropped from the starting side, Troy Hearfield wants to step up in the Olyroos striker's absence on Sunday.
To just pull the trigger when I get half a chance, and that's what I've got to start doing, and sort of stop trying to play the easy option all the time and take a chance.
Jim Callanan, NBN News.
I'm sort of hungry. I'm just hungry and thirsty, so but I don't mind.
It's just my first time fighting at this weight, which is the international cruiserweight level, so it's a good test for me, and if I go well, it's a good indication on how I'm going.
It's just been probably the big country cousin, I guess. We turn up and we're not very popular, but I mean we're there to win, and teams are out to beat us, but we just got to turn up and make sure we're ready and knock them over.
Well, city people can experience what the country is about. Living in the country is fantastic, living amongst the vines, living amongst the wine. It's a fantastic experience, and we want to share that with our city friends.
It was a story which horrified people across the country. The 7-year-old who died of starvation and dehydration in her home on November 3. She weighed just 9 kilograms. Detectives have been continuing their inquiries ever since, with a high police presence in the coastal village as neighbours and relatives were questioned. Today, their investigations culminated with murder warrants issued for the arrest of 46-year-old Blakely Ward and 37-year-old Sharon Ward. Police have released the Wards' photos in the hope someone might recognise them. Detectives believe the couple could be in Sydney, travelling in a 1990 model red Holden Calais with a New South Wales registration of AI45JH. Anyone who can help police find the couple should ring Crime Stoppers on 1800 333 000. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
Greg Combay says he hasn't snubbed the electorate of Charlton after buying a $940,000 beachfront property in Newcastle East. The Labor candidate's purchase will put him at least 10 kilometres from his constituents.
My wife and my son were looking around. They looked in the electorate and outside the electorate across the region for a place that they felt comfortable in, and they found this house and loved it.
His opposite number disagrees.
There are lots of other good areas around the electorate that he could have moved into.
The former union boss's purchase today attracted widespread criticism. But 1 week out from the federal election, Mr Combay says voters should be focusing on bigger issues.
If it takes me 15 minutes to drive to my campaign office in the morning, that's not going to affect my capacity to represent people in Charlton.
Some voters thought the whole issue was rather silly, while others simply didn't care. Madeline Bond, NBN News.
With the election just a week away, Paterson MP Bob Baldwin was under his campaign roadshow Little Big Top today to make another promise. But he didn't bank on some of his noisiest constituents dropping by. Bob was trying to announce that taxpayers would chip in big money towards a solar farm planned for land surrounding Grahamstown Dam.
That a re-elected Howard government will invest $20 million as part of this unique solar farm and manufacturing facility that will deliver 30 megawatts of solar power, renewable energy, that will deliver 160 jobs into our local community.
Jerry McGowan became well known in the Hunter in the 90s as the executive chairman of Impulse Airlines. Now he's back as the face of the solar farm plan.
Stage 1 is 5 megawatts, which will be completed by June 30 in 08. We'll then proceed to bring in a range of upgraded technologies such as thin film over the next few years. We'll also be building a manufacturing site somewhere in the Hunter. We're looking at various sites at the moment.
Paul Lobb, NBN News.
Flying foxes aren't only taking over Hunter Parks and keeping residents awake at night, their flight patterns are placing Westpac Rescue helicopter crew at risk.
I think that they can do damage to the aircraft, depending on whether we've flown through one and chopped it up with the rotor blades or a whole flock of them. There is the potential for damage to windscreens and panels and rotor blades, so yes, the risk is definitely a tangible one.
The creatures are near impossible to see, making landing at John Hunter Hospital and flying over Singleton hazardous. But short of moving their colonies, there's little that can be done. And flying foxes aren't the service's only issue. Thanks to new legislation, getting donations like today's $30,000 from the Miners' Workers Union could become tricky.
We're a bit concerned because the major part of the contributions from our membership is by way of payroll deductions. And under these current work choice legislation that we have, that's been outlawed.
Today's donation will be spent on night vision goggles.
We believe, and our chief pilot believes, it's probably the greatest safety step forward that he's ever seen in his career.
Madeline Bond, NBN News.
Well, this precast facility is approximately 3,500 square metres, and it'll give us the ability to triple our turnover basically in precasting because the demand's so high in New South Wales.